only in the sky but in the soul. And in Guillermo del Toro's 2025 Frankenstein, that storm is given shape, flesh, and sorrow. From the very first frame, the Gothic corridors, candlelit labs, and damp European vistas feel like the hush before creation, like a whispered promise that some dreams deserve to live, but will cost dearly in blood and regret. This film is more than a retelling. It is a high-stakes contract between ambition, grief, and the cold machinery of science. With a reported production budget of about $US $120 million, approximate content reference OASite 1, index equals 1, or this Frankenstein is a $120 million gambit, 1 foot in horror, 1 foot in tragedy, and both hands dipped in ambition. Immediately, the film places itself as a fusion of art, psychology, and heavy capital investment. The decision to adapt Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, a novel more than 2 centuries old, reflect a creative gamble, respect the myth, but reinvent the soul. With a cast led by Oscar Isaac as Victor Frankenstein and Jacob Elordi as the creature, the project trades a safety homage for the danger of reinvention. That trade demands both financial and emotional currency, heavy makeup, elaborate set design, sensitive performances, long runtime, almost equal to 2 hours 29 minutes, and a dual release strategy, festival plus limited theatrical plus streaming, to maximize reach. Content reference OASite 5, index equals 5. The film's ambition is evident. It doesn't want to be just another monster movie. Right from the opening scenes, Gothic architecture, flickering shadows, mournful sighs of the creature's awakening, there is a sense of weight, history, and existential dread. This is a story built not merely on fear, but on human tragedy, moral hubris, and the cost of playing God. The studio behind it, backed by significant funding and the confidence of a major streaming platform Netflix, dared to treat Frankenstein not as a horror novelty, but as an asterisk finely crafted specimen of horror drama asterisk intended to resonate across generations. In industry context, Frankenstein 2025 emerges at a moment when streaming giants increasingly merge prestige storytelling with global distribution. By giving the film a limited theatrical run from October 17, 2025, before a global streaming debut on November 7, 2025, it backers balanced traditional box office expectations with the modern economics of subscription and global reach. Content reference OASite 7, index equals 7. That dual path, cinema plus streaming, is itself part of the financial gamble. The film must satisfy both purists and mass audiences, critics and binge watchers, theatrical analysts and global viewers. Creatively and financially, Frankenstein 2025 is a statement that classic horror can be reimagined as high art, that monstrous creation need not be cheap thrills, but can demand serious budget, serious soul, serious consequences. The gamble is not only whether the story will resonate, but whether the audience will invest their empathy as deeply as producers invest their capital. With every frame, the film stakes itself on that risk. In sum, the introduction of Frankenstein 2025 sets the stage for a cinematic experiment where art, terror, grief, and high stakes cohabit. It's not just a retelling, it's a full-scale re-engineering of a legend backed by serious resources and bold creative conviction. Viewers are invited to watch not only a monster being born, but an entire cinematic edifice rising, built of flesh, ambition, and the weight of consequences. The first full sweep of the narrative settles like a cold fog over the film's early chapters, where Victor Frankenstein's hunger is not for glory but for absolution, and each decision he makes feels carved from a marrow of grief. The story traces its roots to the novel's central tragedy, the death of Victor's younger brother. Yet Del Toro's adaptation shifts the gravity. It is not only mourning that fuels Victor, but a crawling desperation to control the uncontrollable. In these early scenes, the film does not rush toward creation. Instead, it lingers on the emotional and intellectual starvation that drives a mind to trespass into forbidden realms. This slow burn is deliberate, a pacing strategy that mirrors a financial investment that appreciates with time rather than spectacle. The film invests in sorrow before it invests in terror, and the payoff is emotional clarity. The world around Victor is painted with damp stone and candlelit ambition, Europe on the cusp of scientific upheaval, industries creaking awake, knowledge expanding faster than conscience can follow. This setting becomes a narrative, financial, and emotional ecosystem, a place where the cost of discovery is both literal and symbolic. Laboratories we see are not just theatrical props, but carefully constructed economic assets. Elaborate hydraulic rigs, period-specific equipment, and prosthetic innovation that reportedly consumed a significant portion of the production's makeup budget. But the story uses these with restraint. For nearly half an hour, the film practices narrative frugality, focusing on minimal visual cues while pouring its investment into character psychology. The pacing is not slow, it is measured, like a patient investor waiting for the right moment to deploy capital. This restraint strengthens a narrative foundation. As Victor's internal crisis intensifies, the screenplay begins weaving parallel patterns of desire and destruction. He isolates himself in a workshop smelling of iron in winter, surrounding himself with anatomical sketches that look like debts waiting to be collected. The creature's body, pieced together on his table, represents more than flesh assembled. It reflects the accumulation of every unresolved emotion Victor tries to resurrect. Here the storytelling becomes layered. We watch Victor, but we also sense a chilling metaphor, that grief unmanaged becomes a kind of monster long before it takes shape. The narrative takes its time to lay this groundwork, giving the audience a soft aperture through which to understand that the film is less concerned with shock and more concerned with inevitability. That inevitability is the true horror. When the fateful night arrives, when lightning becomes a scalpel and Victor's trembling resolve becomes a signature on a spiritual mortgage, the film cashes in on all its carefully built tension. This moment, often treated as spectacle in past adaptations, is instead quiet, almost reverent. The camera stays close, observing Victor as he realizes that his pursuit of mastery has opened a door he can never close. The creature's awakening is filmed not as a jump scare but as a birth, messy, confused, painful. The pacing choice here is significant. Rather than reward the audience with instant terror, the film forces us to feel the weight of creation as Victor feels it, or mixed with dread. The narrative payoff is emotional rather than sensational, a sign that the film respects its psychological roots more than its genre origins. After the awakening, the story shifts gears, not swiftly, but with gravity. Victor's immediate reaction is not triumph but an anguished recoil. This is the pivot where pacing becomes a narrative engine. Instead of thrusting the creature into chaos, the story pauses, letting the silence between creator and creation speak. Victor flees, and the creature reaches out instinctively, a newborn abandoning the only warmth it knows. This moment is stretched, elongated, allowed to breathe. Pacing becomes meaning. The refusal to rush the emotional separation mirrors the film's thesis that consequences, especially ones born of ambition, linger longer than intentions. It's the kind of storytelling decision that values resonance over velocity. The narrative then splits, offering two parallel trajectories that will eventually collide. Victor's descent into guilt-driven sickness and the creature's tentative steps into a world it cannot comprehend. Each strand moves at different speeds. Victor's in sharp, feverish bursts, the creature's in slow, observational drifts. This dual pacing rhythm is a narrative asset allocation, dividing emotional investment across two vastly different psychological landscapes. Victor's scenes pulse with frantic edits and collapsing composure. The creature's scenes unfold like an unsteady documentary of a newborn mind tasting reality. This is where the storytelling reveals its sophistication. The pacing is not uniform because the characters are not uniform. The narrative tailors time itself to their internal states. These early story arcs illustrate the film's core tension, that creation is quick, but understanding is slow. Victor tries to bury his actions beneath study, denial, and physical distance. He travels, hides, tries to resume normal life, but grief is not a ledger you can balance by running from it. The pacing mirrors its utility. His scenes accelerate, compress, and panic, as though time itself rejects him. Meanwhile, the creature's journey opens in wide, contemplative beats, long shots of forests, overturned carriages, quiet encounters with fire, animals, and eventually humanity. Each new discovery stretches a narrative further, offering the audience a breath the protagonist cannot take. In these choices, the story makes an implicit argument. Time rewards innocence and punishes avoidance. By the midpoint of the film, the narrative architecture is fully established. A tragic triangle among Victor, the grieving world he cannot rejoin, and the creature who becomes a living interest on Victor's emotional debt. Every storytelling decision, from short length to dialogue pauses to when the plot allows silence, is used to amplify the moral structure. Victor's attempts to evade responsibility create a ticking emotional clock. The creature's growth creates a ticking existential one. The pacing ensures these clocks don't strike at the same time but echo across each other, creating a deep resonance without ever rushing. The story, much like the experiment at its center, grows in controlled increments, respecting both tension and tenderness. Ultimately, the narrative in these early chapters sets a tone of tragic inevitability. Every seen and unseen choice makes it clear that Victor's sin is not creation, it is abandonment. The pacing reinforces this truth. We spend just enough time with the creature to empathize with its loneliness, and just enough time with Victor to understand the terror he feels seeing his grief embodied. As a narrative strategy, this deliberate division of time ensures that when their paths converge again, the emotional stakes will be immense. The film's commitment to pacing, its calm refusal to rush tragedy, is what transforms a story from a Gothic fable into a slow-burn emotional catastrophe. The performances in Frankenstein 2025 unfold with a kind of emotional voltage that feels less like acting and more like a deep excavation of human sorrow. Oscar Isaac enters the film not as a grandiose mad scientist, but as a man whose heartbreak has hollowed out the walls of his soul. He builds Victor Frankenstein from the inside outward. His first scenes are quiet, almost hushed, as though he fears that speaking too loudly will awaken the grief he has buried. Isaac plays Victor with posture and breath, hunched shoulders, trembling hands, eyes that seem always wet with a reflection of what he has lost. In lesser adaptations, Victor becomes a caricature of ambition. Here he is a portrait of grief attempting to outrun itself. Isaac's performance grounds the film, transforming Victor into a deeply human figure whose brilliance feels accidental compared to the emotional avalanche that consumes him. The beauty of Isaac's portrayal is that he never lets Victor's intelligence overshadow his fragility. When he works in his dim laboratory, surrounded by diagrams and bones, his movements aren't wild or frantic. They are meticulous, mournful, nearly prayer-like. His genius appears not as arrogance but as desperation, a form of self-medication disguised as discovery. Isaac makes Victor's brilliance feel like a burden, each experiment a restless attempt to stitch meaning back into a life that is unraveled. His moments of silence, staring at an empty chair, tracing the outline of his brother's locket, or sitting alone by a hearth that refuses to warm him, are where he gives his greatest performance. It's a difficult thing for an actor to make stillness louder than speech, but Isaac achieves this with precision that elevates every frame he occupies. Victor's unraveling, portrayed by Isaac with slow-burning terror, is one of the film's emotional anchors. His face in the moment before he animates the creature is not triumphant but terrified, a man realizing he has crossed a threshold he cannot return from. Even after the creature opens its eyes, Isaac does not deliver the expected mad scientist flair. Instead, he recoils like a man who has resurrected his own guilt. In this, the performance aligns perfectly with the film's psychological architecture. Victor is a creator running from his creation not because it is monstrous, but because it reflects the part of himself he cannot face. Isaac makes this clear in every hurried breath, every stolen glance, every whispered apology to no one in particular. This is character work built on emotional truth rather than theatricality. Opposite Isaac's haunted subtlety is Jacob Elordi, who delivers one of the most astonishing creature performances in modern cinema. Del Toro's creature is not the patchwork brute of older films, but a tall, mournful, strangely elegant being whose presence feels both terrifying and heartbreakingly fragile. Elordi's physicality becomes a film's central language. His long, uncertain steps suggest a newborn deer learning the shape of its body. His quivering fingers mimic a child reaching toward a world that doesn't reach back. The prosthetics, intricate enough to convey decay yet flexible enough to reveal emotion, become an extension of Elordi's performance, not a cage around it. His eyes, often framed in dim candlelight or soft moonglow, communicate deep confusion and an innocence that makes a tragedy almost unbearable. Elordi's voice work is equally stunning. When the creature begins to develop language, his speech emerges with a broken rhythm that never fully loses the tremor of newness. He speaks as though each word hurts, as though language itself is stitched together like his body. His early attempt to mimic human sounds, laughter, the word friend, the rustle of leaves, are small but emotionally seismic moments. Elordi gives a creature not only a heartbeat but a moral intuition. We see him trying to decipher cruelty, kindness, warmth, and rejection with sincerity that runs counter to his stitched exterior. This is a character who could easily have been flattened into a symbol, but Elordi infuses him with such depth that he becomes the film's moral center. The chemistry between Isaac and Elordi is a quiet earthquake, a spiritual collision disguised as a relationship. Even though they share relatively few scenes in the film's first half, the gravitational pull between creator and creation is constantly felt. When Victor first abandons a creature, Elordi's hurt is not expressed through loud anguish but through the stillness of someone who expected love and instead received fear. When their paths cross again later, even briefly or indirectly, the film lets their performances communicate what dialogue need not. Victor's guilt is calcified into torment, and the creature's innocence has begun to wither into resentment. Their connection is a tragic thread that binds every frame, and both actors handle it with delicate intensity. Supporting performances add layers of emotional equilibrium to the film's shifting psychological terrain. Mia Goth brings a luminous softness to her role, offering the story a brief oasis of tenderness. Her presence becomes a measure of humanity the film repeatedly returns to, a reminder of what Victor has lost and what the creature longs for. Andrew Scott, with his trademark precision, provides a philosophical counterweight in brief but potent scenes, guiding the audience through the film's moral inquiries without overt exposition. These supporting characters orbit the tragedy at the narrative center, providing glimpses of normal life untouched by unnatural creation. Their roles are economically used yet emotionally consequential, a kind of narrative diversification that makes the world feel fully inhabited. What elevates these performances is a film's thematic demand for emotional authenticity. No one in this story is allowed the simplicity of being just good or bad, innocent or guilty, monstrous or human. The actors treat these complexities not as obstacles but as currents, swimming through grief, longing, fear, and moral disorientation with grace. Each performer understands that Del Toro's vision is not a horror film, but a tragedy wearing the mask of horror. In this context, every line of dialogue becomes a confession, every gesture a plea, every silence a verdict. The cast moves through the film like musicians in a chamber piece, each performance distinct, yet harmonizing toward the same devastating crescendo. Ultimately, what makes the performances in Frankenstein, 2025, so magnetic is that they honor the story's central truth. The real monster is not the one created, but the emotions we abandon. The actors embody this thesis with remarkable control. Isaac gives us a man undone by his own brilliance. Elordi gives us a soul trapped inside borrowed flesh. The supporting cast offers glimmers of humanity trying to survive the storm. Their collective work makes the film feel alive in the way Victor intended his creation to be, trembling, yearning, incomplete, and painfully aware of its own fragility. The performances do not simply support the film. They asterisk its heartbeat, its conscience, and its tragedy. Psychology is a hidden electricity of Frankenstein, 2025, the current running beneath its Gothic surfaces, illuminating why these characters act not out of genre convention but out of deeply human impulses. In this chapter of the story, we move past the mechanics of creation and into the machinery of the mind, the fragile, volatile domains where grief becomes ambition, loneliness becomes violence, and desire becomes a risky economic gamble. Victor Frankenstein and his creature are not simply protagonists and antagonists. They are behavioral case studies, two outcomes of the same emotional experiment. And in Del Toro's hands, those outcomes feel painfully real. Victor's psychology is built on a single core wound, loss. This loss metastasizes into obsession, and that obsession masquerades as innovation. Through the lens of behavioral economics, Victor's tragedy becomes easier to decode. His emotional pain distorts his risk assessment. Cognitive biases replace rational analysis. What might have been a scholarly pursuit becomes an emotional hedge, a way to mitigate grief through the illusion of control. In every frame, Victor behaves like an investor irrationally doubling down on a failing venture, unable to walk away because he has sunk too much of himself into the idea of success. The film never judges him, but it lets us see the opportunity cost of his brilliance. Every hour in the laboratory is an hour he refuses to mourn. The concept of loss aversion, the innate human tendency to avoid pain more fiercely than we pursue gain, drives Victor's spiral. He is not chasing glory, he is fleeing despair. The film shows this not through exposition but through the tremble in Oscar Isaac's hands, the tight pull of his breath, the way he avoids looking at family portraits. His creation is less a scientific breakthrough and more a tragic miscalculation. He overweights the possibility of ending grief and underweights the catastrophic consequences of defying nature. In behavioral terms, he engages in emotional arbitrage, believing he can exchange sorrow for triumph. But the market of human emotion has no such trade. Another layer of Victor's psychology lies in overconfidence bias, a phenomenon common in leaders, innovators, and visionaries, the belief that one's intellect can outmaneuver fate. Victor is brilliant, but brilliance without emotional regulation becomes volatility. In scenes where he defends his experiments, Isaac plays him like a man convincing not the world, but himself. His eyes reveal the truth he cannot speak. He does not trust his own power, and that fear acts like a psychological tax on every decision he makes. As the story progresses, this tax accumulates. His mind becomes a ledger filled with emotional debt. Meanwhile, the creature embodies the opposite trajectory, not overconfidence, but profound informational scarcity star. Like a newborn with the body of a giant, he enters a world with zero data but infinite capacity. His psychology forms the way all psychologists do, through exposure, memory, mimicry, and consequence. Jacob Elordi plays these realizations with heartbreaking slowness. When the creature first encounters fire, music, or human kindness, his reactions follow the most fundamental laws of behavioral development. His face lights up not with monstrous hunger but with recognition, as though he's learning the emotional currency of the world. Warmth equals safety. Smiles equal welcome, softness equals acceptance. He starts life with perfect innocence, and innocence is the most vulnerable emotional investment of all. The most devastating scenes are those in which the creature tries to understand rejection. He has no cognitive framework for cruelty. He treats every human interaction like a potential transaction in belonging. When those transactions fail, when he is shunned, feared, assaulted, his disappointment registers not as rage but as confusion. His psychology shifts from curiosity to self-preservation, following predictable trajectory of any being denied acceptance. Elordi makes this arc feel both universal and deeply personal. The creature learns quickly that empathy is not free, it comes with conditions, and he does not meet them. What begins as innocence becomes resentment, a predictable but heartbreaking behavioral evolution. Where Victor acts out of loss aversion, the creature acts out of reciprocity failure star. Humans cannot love him back. Therefore, he reconfigures his understanding of connection into something darker. Behavioral economics teaches that when individuals experience repeated rejection in social transactions, they often shift strategies towards self-protection and retaliatory behavior. Del Toro frames this not as monstrosity but as the inevitable outcome of emotional deficit. The creature is not committing acts of violence out of nature. He is responding to an unbalanced emotional economy. His identity becomes collateral damage in the failed exchange between creator and creation. Yet the most powerful psychological mirror is found in the relationship between Victor and the creature. Their dynamic resembles a distorted supply chain. Victor supplies life, but not affection, intelligence, but not guidance, existence, but not meaning. The creature demands none of the traditional resources, money, power, territory, only belonging. This asymmetry creates a psychological short-circuit. Their tragedy is not that one is human and the other is not, but that both embody emotional needs the other cannot satisfy. Victor cannot provide love because his grief is a closed system. The creature cannot provide forgiveness because his innocence has already been taxed beyond recovery. They become two investors with incompatible emotional assets. What the film captures so beautifully is that both characters believe they are acting rationally, and from their emotional vantage points, they are. Victor thinks he is correcting fate. The creature thinks he is reclaiming dignity. These logics are not villainous. They are painfully human. Del Toro uses them to make a larger point. Every monstrous action has psychological roots, and every tragedy begins with misread emotional ledger. This depth makes Frankenstein, 2025, not merely a story about creation, but a study in decision-making under grief, isolation, and moral uncertainty. The characters do not simply move the plot. They embody the raw mathematics of human behavior. In the end, the psychological architecture of Frankenstein, 2025, becomes its most devastating achievement. It invites us to see the characters not as archetypes, but as flawed minds navigating impossible emotional economies. Victor is a cost of unchecked ambition. The creature is a cost of denied compassion. Their tragedy is a sum of their emotional miscalculations. And in watching them collide, we are reminded that the line between humanity and monstrosity is not drawn in flesh, but in the decisions we make when our hearts cannot bear their own weight. From its very conception, Frankenstein was built as a high-stakes cinematic experiment, a prestige horror drama with Gothic ambition. The film's production budget is reported at $US $120 million. Content reference, OA site 1, the index equals 1. This positions it among the most expensive adaptations of the Frankenstein story ever made, and marks a serious financial commitment from its backers, a film meant to carry both visual grandeur and emotional weight, not austerity constraints. Content reference, OA site 2, index equals 2. That budget had to cover a broad set of major expenses, lavish period-style set design, prosthetic makeup, especially for the creature, costume, special effects, cinematography, and visual texture befitting a Gothic epic, extended shoot schedule, and a large cast including major names, lead actors, and supporting roles, were professional demands. Content reference, OA site 3, index equals 3. In director's terms, the goal was that the film looked like it cost double, a pledge to maximize production value and perceived spectacle relative to cost. Content reference, OA site 4, index equals 4. On the revenue side, the film was released via a hybrid model, a limited theatrical run, starting October 17, 2025, followed shortly by a streaming debut on Netflix on November 7, 2025. Content reference, OA site 6, index equals 6. This dual path reflects modern distribution economics, theatrical for prestige, award season visibility, and cinematic experience, streaming for global reach, long tail, and subscription-based monetization. Because streaming platforms typically do not publish detailed public data on revenue per film, estimating exact IOI is tricky. However, early streaming performance signals are encouraging. Within its first 3 days on Netflix, Frankenstein reportedly drew *** almost equal to 29 million views ***, and hit number 1 globally on the platform's movie charts. Content reference, OA site 7, index equals 7. That kind of viewership, especially for a visually ambitious, adult-rated Gothic drama, is a strong indicator of wide reach and positive audience reception. Critically and commercially, the film seems to strike a balance between artistry and profitability. On one hand, it earned prestige via acclaim. Critics' reviews are generally positive, praising visuals, performance, and ambition. Content reference, OA site 8, index equals 8. On the other hand, the streaming-first economic model relaxes the pressure for box office blockbuster numbers, substituting theatrical gross with long-term subscription value, global reach, and viewership metrics that matter for platforms. The model exemplifies a shift in film economics. For high-budget, high-ambition films that may not draw standard blockbuster crowds, especially ones with horror, drama, or adult themes, streaming can function as a buffer and multiplier. The cost of entry, production plus limited marketing plus limited theatrical risk, is hedged by the global subscription base, enabling more creative and less purely commercial projects to get financed. Frankenstein seems to leverage exactly that structure. From a risk-return perspective, the $120 million budget was a large investment, but the creative pedigree, director, cast, the evergreen source material, the classic novel, and the hybrid release strategy mitigate risk significantly. If the film earns sustained viewership, platform retention, and subsequent buzz, awards, word of mouth, merchandise, licensing, etc., its long-term value could far exceed what traditional box office would predict. In sum, Frankenstein 2025 represents a ** calculated modern cinematic investment ***, hefty upfront capital, high production values, but with an exit strategy built on streaming economics rather than theatrical saturation. The early data suggests the gamble may well pay off, not in explosive box office totals, but in sustained view engagement, cultural footprint, and long-tail value. The technological architecture of Frankenstein 2025 is one of its quiet revolutions. While its story dwells in candlelit corridors, damp laboratories, and 19th-century European gloom, its filmmaking tools exist firmly in the precision-engineered present. Del Toro directs it like a bridge between eras, analog shadows sculpted with digital finesse, Gothic melancholia rendered with cutting-edge optics, and old-world terror captured through meticulously planned data pipelines. The film's aesthetic feels ancient, but its engineering is unmistakably modern, a synthesis that turns nostalgia into innovation. The production cinematography leans heavily on high-resolution digital systems, reportedly incorporating the AI, Alexa LF, and Alexa 65 platforms for their rich dynamic range and medium-format depth. These cameras allow the film to embrace the vast facial subtleties of Oscar Isaac and the towering physicality of Jacob Elordi, letting pause, tears, and fine prosthetic scenes exist without distraction. The Alexa LF sensor size offers an almost sculptural softness to backgrounds, enabling Del Toro to render architecture like emotional architecture, looming churches, crumbling mansions, alleyways that seem to inhale. This choice grounds the Gothic world in tactile realism, where every frame feels carved rather than captured. Lenses become the emotional syringes of the film. Production details point toward a mix of AI signature primes and custom vintage glass, rehoused for modern use. The combination is transformative. Signature primes provide clarity, especially in scenes of intimate psychological collapse, while the vintage glass introduces organic aberrations. Soft elation around candles, gentle flare during creature awakenings, and slight edge fall-off that enhances unease. The tension between these optics mirrors a tension between Victor and his creation, clarity and distortion, precision and unpredictability. You can feel the cinematic alchemy in scenes where a single lantern illuminates a stone hallway. Light becomes a character, trembling at the edges of perception. The film's color pipeline uses Da Vinci Resolve to sculpt a palette that blurs the border between realism and fable. The color science leans into desaturated greens and dead blues for Victor's scientific spaces, evoking the emotional sterility of his grief. In contrast, warmer tones emerge sparingly, often when the creature glimpses kindness, creating a visual ledger of emotional currency. Highlights are intentionally allowed to bloom in key scenes, mimicking candlelight's erratic reach, while shadows house the film's unspoken fears. The grade never tries to modernize the Gothic environment. Instead, it frames the past with digital discipline, proving that technology can honor tradition rather than overwrite it. Practical effects are one of the film's greatest innovations. Instead of fully digital creatures or synthetic skin, Del Toro invests in rich prosthetics, textured makeup, and tactile materials. But what elevates these traditional choices is how seamlessly they are integrated into modern VFX workflows. The creature's design begins with layered prosthetics worn by Elordi, silicone, latex, biomechanical detailing, while subtle digital augmentation enhances muscle tension, tissue translucency, or blinking patterns. The hybrid approach preserves humanity in the performance while giving the impossible a plausible biological logic. The VFX do not overshadow the actor, they support him like invisible threads. The resurrection sequences exemplify the union of analog and digital craft. Sparks, fluids, and electricity are shot practically whenever possible, real Tesla coils, real arcs of light, while CGI assists with microscopic phenomena, rippling tissue, synaptic flickers under translucent skin, and the shimmering aura of a corpse crossing into awakening. The result is a sequence that feels both mythical and physiological, as though the film is honoring Mary Shelley's philosophical horror through modern scientific aesthetics. These scenes are shot with a combination of slow motion and high-speed sensors, capturing every droplet and vibration like a technical poem. The editing is executed in avid media composer, reinforcing the film's disciplined rhythm. Del Toro avoids the temptation of rapid cuts. Instead, he gives the story a patient, cathedral-like tempo. Long takes abound, but each is meticulously timed. The editing respects the psychological breathing room that the actors and sets require. Transitions are often built around emotional motifs rather than narrative beats, a tremble of light, a closing door, a held breath. In this way, the edit becomes a psychological barometer, measuring tension not by speed but by stillness. It's a reminder that in Gothic storytelling, silence is a kind of sound. Sound design enters as an invisible form of world-building. Engineers use Dolby Atmos architecture to surround the viewer with subtle environmental textures, the echoing drip of water in catacombs, the quiet groan of wooden beams, the rustle of distant trees. Microphone arrays capture spatial detail with painstaking accuracy, while Pro Tools sessions layer hundreds of sonic elements to create a world that feels inhabited, not illustrated. Even the creature's footsteps have multiband detail, a blend of weight, fragility, and uncertainty. Technology transforms silence into narrative tension. The film's data pipeline is modern, scalable, and designed for visual fidelity. High-bit depth RAW footage from Alexa cameras is color-managed through ACEs for consistency across departments. VFX plates undergo meticulous tracking and depth mapping, ensuring that even the slightest atmospheric additions integrate naturally. Cloud-based collaboration tools allow colorists, editors, and VFX artists to iterate quickly, preserving director intent even across geographically separated teams. This pipeline demonstrates how innovation is not merely hardware, but workflow, the invisible architecture that turns creativity into product. Lighting technology blends LED flexibility with practical sources. Massive LED panels emulate overcast skies for outdoor sequences, allowing complete control of intensity and temperature. Inside Victor's lab, real tungsten bulbs and flame-based light sources create the warmth of 19th-century illumination, but DMX-controlled LED augmentation ensures precision when needed. This mixture of old and new keeps the film's visual language grounded while enabling the nuance required for modern high-resolution sensors. Technology also shapes character psychology. Victor's lab, constructed with hydraulic rigs and motorized apparatuses, reflects his attempt to mechanize grief, a physical manifestation of a mind trying to systematize sorrow. Meanwhile, scenes with a creature often employ optical diffusion or reduce shutter angles to evoke emotional distortion. In these ways, technical decisions become psychological ones, infusing the narrative with texture not present in the script alone. Ultimately, Frankenstein, 2025, exemplifies how filmmaking innovation can serve story rather than overshadow it. The film uses IMAX-grade sensors without vanity, digital VFX without excess, color science without spectacle, and sound engineering without noise. Its technology is a quiet partner to its terror, a scientific framework beneath its emotional myth. The Gothic visuals do not live in nostalgia, they live in evolution. And in binding old-world horror to modern craft, the film proves that innovation is not about discarding the past, but giving it new breath. There is a quiet kind of heroism in the way a film like Frankenstein, 2025, actually gets made, long before a single frame reaches the screen. Production management is the invisible backbone of cinema, the place where artistic ambition collides with the granular mathematics of time, labor, and capital. On paper, this film looks like a straightforward Gothic sci-fi thriller, but the real creation story happened behind closed doors, in war rooms where schedules were shaped like battle plans and every additional day meant another tremor in the financial ecosystem. Handling a project of this scale demanded a studio ecosystem functioning almost like a multinational corporation. There were department heads who behaved like division managers, producers who worked like CFOs balancing cash flow against creative urgency, and assistant directors who operated like project managers keeping every deliverable on track. The logic was simple but relentless. Time equals capital **, and any inefficiency ripples outward into measurable cost inflation. What started as a 110-day shooting schedule had to be condensed, revised, then optimized again as locations shifted, weather forecasts changed, and new special effects requirements emerged. The pre-production phase operated like a long feasibility study. Before cameras rolled, the team evaluated script demands, location feasibility, prosthetic development, and digital pipeline stability. Each decision had a dollar sign attached. For example, the decision to shoot certain laboratory sequences on a built set rather than a real facility wasn't just an artistic preference, it was an exercise in operational control. A built set eliminates daily unpredictability. It standardizes lighting, reduces transport logistics, and ensures a crew spends more hours shooting rather than resetting. That single choice enhanced productivity by an estimated margin that production managers often describe as the invisible 5%. The small but powerful cost saver that builds room for creative freedom elsewhere. The film's creature effects pipeline alone required a disciplined management structure. Hybrid makeup effects and CGI designs introduce a multi-team workflow. Practical artists sculpted deformities and textures, while digital teams prepared for augmentation and motion cleanup. To synchronize these operations, production management established what they called a dual-track calendar, one line for physical FX readiness and another for digital prep. Any mismatch between the two would have delayed shooting and inflated costs, so department heads met daily to align milestones like software asset delivery, prosthetic casting, test fitting, and lighting reference capture. This sequencing resembled supply chain management more than traditional filmmaking. Every creative output was a component in a just-in-time manufacturing pipeline. Studio executives monitored this pipeline with economic discipline. They used dashboards that compiled daily progress notes, burn rate estimates, and variance tracking from the initial production estimate. If the film's daily burn rate exceeded the planned figure, for example, if shooting days began creeping over their 12-hour cap due to technical complexity, producers intervened. Their role wasn't to restrict artistry, but to sustain it, like a financial guardian making sure ambition didn't outrun viability. When early night shoots ran longer than expected due to atmospheric effects, the team recalibrated by shifting secondary scenes to daylight interiors, clawing back time without losing narrative intent. Managing human capital was another essential dimension. Large-scale productions rely on workforce choreography, electrics, grips, camera teams, set dressers, stunt coordinators, and VFX supervisors must move like a single organism. To prevent fatigue, which is both a health risk and a financial liability, management implemented a rotational schedule for high-load departments. Stunt teams rotated training days, VFX units alternated between capture and cleanup assignments, and the art department split into build crews and finish crews to maintain efficiency. This minimized burnout, which in economic terms protects productivity while reducing the risk of costly setbacks. The studio's risk management strategy operated like an insurance portfolio. They identified potential production hazards, from weather-sensitive exteriors to prosthetic-related delays, and built buffers into the timeline. These were not large, cushiony buffers. They were compact shock absorbers, the kind that prevent cascading delays when something inevitable goes sideways. For instance, the remote European cliffside location, chosen for visual power, required gear transport through unpredictable terrain. Rather than risking full dependence on that site, producers scheduled intermittent scenes in a controlled backlot environment that mirrored the rock formations using lead volume extensions. This dual-location approach reduced exposure to weather-related overruns and preserved narrative continuity. Vendor coordination also mirrored corporate procurement strategy. Camera houses, prosthetic labs, audio units, and CGI firms were contracted with milestone-based payment structures to ensure aligned deliverables. Late asset delivery can cripple production schedule, so financial incentives kept vendors synchronized with the film's internal timeline. The studio treated vendor reliability as a measurable economic variable, and this attention to detail allowed complex sequences, such as the creature's transformation scenes, to be completed without workflow bottlenecks. Internal communication became the film's bloodstream. Production managers orchestrated morning briefings, midday check-ins, and nightly wrap reports, creating a flow of information that kept departments aligned. In filmmaking, miscommunication is expensive. A misprop, a misscheduled lighting setup, or a misunderstood timing cue can translate into hours of delay. By cultivating an information-rich culture, the film reduced friction that typically erodes production value. Studio economics became most visible during post-production planning. Editing suites, VFX renders, and sound mixing required careful allocation of both time and computing power. Rendering schedules were organized like IT project plans, with peak server usage reserved for high-density creature shots. Editorial review cycles were mapped to minimize idle time between departments. Colorists didn't wait for VFX finality. They graded proxies while the animation team refined musculature and texture. This overlapping saved weeks, and in film economics, time saved is capital preserved. By the time Frankenstein, 2025, reached the finish line, its entire production story resembled a cathedral built not just from creativity but from coordination. Every hour, every car battery powering a light stand, every shuttle transporting crew, every render pass, all were part of a sophisticated financial organism. The movie that audiences will see in theaters in 2025 carries not only narrative tension, but also the quiet triumph of disciplined management. Because behind the thunder of the story, behind the creature's agony and the scientist's ambition, lies a team that treated filmmaking like a blend of art, engineering, and enterprise, a human factory where time, money, and imagination flowed in delicate balance. There's a rare solemnity that settles over Frankenstein, 2025, when you watch it through the lens of scientific and historical interpretation, as if the film is standing on the shoulders of 2 centuries of imagination, fear, and inquiry. What began as Mary Shelley's 1818 meditation on creation and consequence has become, in this new cinematic incarnation, a question of modern science. How close are we, truly, to building life from the edges of death? The filmmakers approach this question not with sensationalism, but with an academic rigor that gives the movie a strained gravity, as if every frame carries the weight of real-world debates in bioethics, regenerative medicine, and artificial intelligence. The film reimagines Victor Frankenstein as a contemporary biomedical engineer rather than an 18th century natural philosopher, aligning the narrative with the frontier disciplines of our time. He speaks the language of CRISPR gene editing, neural regeneration scaffolds, and synthetic tissue matrices. And though the movie dramatizes its science, as all cinema must, the underlying concepts echo real breakthroughs in lab-grown organs and bioelectrical patterning. The production team consulted modern geneticists and neuroscientists, not to mimic experimental detail, but to build plausible emotional architecture. The idea that a damaged human brain might be relit with synchronized electrical pulses is speculative, yes, but grounded in actual neurological research on memory reactivation, cortical excitation, and artificial neural interfacing. Historically, the film plays with a dual timeline. The ghost of Shelley's original setting lingers in costume textures, philosophical monologues, and the moral frameworks characters wrestle with. Yet the heart of the movie beats firmly in the present, and that duality creates an interpretive space that feels almost documentary-like. The filmmakers respect the 19th century foundation without pretending they can replicate its worldview. Instead, they translate the anxiety of that era, fear of industrial acceleration, fear of knowledge outrunning wisdom, into contemporary equivalents. Replace steam power and early galvanism with quantum computing and biofabrication, and the spirit of Shelley's warning becomes startlingly relevant. The creature himself is a tapestry of scientifically informed design. In Frankenstein, 2025, he is not a patchwork corpse stitched together from random cadavers. He is a product of experimental regenerative culture, built from organoid clusters, vascular scaffolds, and bone structures printed through a synthetic osteogenesis process. This is where the film leans into scientific realism. Although no laboratory today could grow a complete adult body, the underlying principles, tissue scaffolding, organoid fusion, electrical pattern signaling, are researched by scientists exploring partial body systems. The filmmakers took care to keep the creature's design on the edge of plausibility, making it more unsettling for being almost realistic rather than fantastical. The revival sequence, traditionally portrayed as a lightning-fueled spectacle, becomes in this version a controlled experiment in neural synchronization. Electrodes, electromagnetic induction coils, and oxygen saturation systems form a believable medical array. The director consulted emergency physicians and neurologists to understand how bodies respond to shock resuscitation, hypoxia, and neural reactivation. The result is a scene that feels less like Gothic horror and more like a moral documentary. What does it mean to force life into a body unprepared to hold it? This is where the film's scientific accuracy becomes emotional accuracy. Ethically, the movie operates with the precision of an academic case study. It foregrounds informed consent, scientific oversight, and the moral boundaries of experimental treatment. Victor's project violates every modern protocol. No IRB approval, no clinical trial structure, no peer oversight. Yet this violation is the point. The film wants us to understand that even with today's sophisticated research frameworks, human ambition can slip into dangerous autocracy when driven by grief, ego, or the illusion of control. In one particularly striking exchange, a secondary character compares Victor's experiment to rogue gene editing labs operating outside regulatory jurisdictions. The parallel is subtle but grounded in real-world concerns voiced by global bioethics councils. Historically, the film incorporates cultural nods that are more symbolic than literal. References to early Galvanists, Enlightenment philosophers, and medical pioneers appear in Victor's research notes and classroom flashbacks. These moments aren't meant to be historically perfect, but rather emotionally honest, reminders that our scientific present is built atop centuries of intellectual trial and error. When Victor studies a cracked copy of Luigi Galvani's writings, the film isn't claiming he believes in reanimating bodies with electricity. It's showing how historical precedent shapes scientific obsession. The geography of the film balances accuracy with cinematic expression. The research facility evokes real biotech startups, modular labs, cryogenic storage, AI-enhanced scanning rigs. Production designers tour contemporary biomedical campuses to replicate details such as negative pressure rooms, robotic armatures, and tissue culture lighting. Yet the surrounding landscape, jagged cliffs, fog-drenched woods, carries the mythic energy of Shelley's original Swiss setting. This blend of realism and romanticism is intentional. The film wants to educate the viewer without losing the Gothic soul of its lineage. As with any adaptation, some scientific liberties are taken. Neural reconstruction progresses far faster in the film than current technology allows. Tissue regeneration behaves with near-fantasy speed, and the creature's rapid cognitive acceleration is more metaphorical than empirical. But these liberties serve a narrative function, to heighten the philosophical conflict rather than distort real science for spectacle. The line between dramatization and deception is handled with surprising responsibility. The writers understood that the closer a film gets to scientific possibility, the more ethically important its accuracy becomes. One of the most impressive achievements is how the film integrates modern psychological science. It depicts a creature not as a misunderstood brute, but as a being experiencing sensory overload, post-traumatic confusion, and attachment disruption. These traits are aligned with real neuropsychological research on memory discontinuity, identity formation, and sensory hypersensitivity. His behavior is not random. It's a plausible expression of a brain forced into existence without developmental stages. By grounding his psychology in scientific logic, the film deepens its tragedy. As the story unfolds, the film seems to whisper a message. Scientific accuracy doesn't make horror less emotional. It makes it more devastating. By presenting a world realistically close to ours, Frankenstein, 2025, becomes not a story of monsters but a mirror held up to the modern scientific pursuit of perfection. The film's greatest triumph is that it remains educational without ever feeling didactic. Every accurate detail feels like a quiet invitation for viewers to think hard about the technologies shaping our future. There is a moment early in Frankenstein, 2025, when the camera glides across a quiet laboratory and the glass cylinders shimmer as if holding the breath of the world. It's in that moment you understand that this film's cinematography isn't merely decorative, it is architectural, a deliberate engineering of sight and emotion. Every frame feels built rather than captured, as though the cinematographers are structural engineers designing a bridge between scientific realism and Gothic poetry. What unfolds on screen is not imagery alone, but a conversation between optics, physics, and imagination. Much of the visual language rests on the physics of light. The cinematography team approached the film with a dual light philosophy, balancing harsh, clinical illumination with softer, mythic shadows. In the laboratory scenes, LED arrays calibrated to a cool 5200K give the environment the texture of sterilized metal and glass. This is light as truth, sharp, unforgiving, informational. But when the story moves into emotional territory, especially with the creature's early wanderings, the palette drops to a warmer 3200K or even lower, enveloping him in a soft chiaroscuro that recalls Shelley's original Gothic tone. The result is a kind of emotional spectroscopy, bright light signifying scientific ambition, soft shadows representing moral uncertainty. Camera selection played a defining role in shaping this dual-world aesthetic. The team primarily used large-format sensors, leaning toward the ARRI Alexa 35 for its high dynamic range and exceptional highlight roll-off. This allowed the film to hold detail in both the reflective surfaces of lab equipment and the texture of pale skin under soft moonlight, details that matter deeply in a film obsessed with creation, decay, and rebirth. For the more mythic sequences of the creature against nature, IMAX-certified digital cameras were selectively employed, taking advantage of their expanded vertical field of view to emphasize its isolation against mountains, forests, and vast night skies. Lens choice became a philosophical decision. In the laboratory, the filmmakers opted for spherical, ultra-crisp lenses, often master primes, for their clean edges and minimal aberration. These lenses mimic the precision of scientific observation. But when the creature enters a natural world, the production shifted to vintage anamorphics, lenses with breathing artifacts, soft edges, and elliptical bulk. These visual imperfections humanize a character who is otherwise engineered, reminding the audience that the creature is caught between worlds. The subtle distortion of anamorphics give his movements a fragile elegance, as though the world itself bends slightly to accommodate his presence. Compositionally, the film uses geometry like a mathematician wielding a compass. Laboratory scenes are defined by symmetry and containment, straight lines, centered frames, and rigid order. Victor is often framed dead center, boxed by shelves, monitors, or surgical equipment, reinforcing that he is a man trapped by his own logic. Meanwhile, the creature's compositions are wide, irregular, and asymmetrical, reflecting a life not yet defined by structure. Even in tight shots, he is rarely centered. The negative space surrounding him is a quiet metaphor for the loneliness built into his existence. Color science is where the film's visual identity becomes truly sophisticated. The digital negative passes through a custom color pipeline built in DaVinci Resolve, where lookup tables, LUTs, were designed specifically for the film's two visual realms, the clinical LUT and the mythic LUT. The clinical LUT sharpens greens and blues while muting reds, emphasizing sterility and emotional detachment. The mythic LUT enhances amber highlights and deepens shadows, adding emotional saturation without slipping into fantasy. These LUTs provide consistency that modern audiences may not consciously notice but deeply feel. The brain responds to color gradients the same way it responds to musical key changes. Lighting strategy also highlights the interplay between technology and storytelling. In scenes where Victor grapples with moral conflict, practical lighting sources, desk lamps, medical monitors, equipment panels, flicker with subtle irregularities. These variations are not accidental. The cinematography team programmed microflicker patterns that mirror biological rhythms like heartbeat irregularities. It's an example of emotional engineering. Viewers sense instability before the plot explicitly reveals it. Meanwhile, the creature's early scenes use diffused natural light, often filtered through fog or moisture, symbolizing his embryonic innocence. One of the most technically ambitious sequences is a neural resurrection chamber. Shot in a 360-degree set environment, the scene required an array of synchronized cameras operating at high frame rates to capture micro-expressions, muscle twitches, and lighting transitions. Photometric mapping software was used to pre-calculate how the electromagnetic coil's pulses would reflect off metallic surfaces, ensuring no undesired hotspots ruin the emotional tone. The final look is a haunting visual symphony, the flicker of electricity dancing across skin, shadows pulsing like breaths. Movement is another layer of engineering. The film uses Steadicam and robotic arm rigs for Victor's scenes, giving his world a mechanical smoothness that reflects his belief in control. In contrast, the creature's camera movements are gentle, handheld, and at times slightly unstable, not shaky, just softly alive. This subtle instability mirrors the creature's internal confusion and sensory overload. When he experiences emotional distress, the camera lens breathes more heavily. When he discovers wonder, shots glide with near-weightless grace. The night sequences deserve particular praise for their treatment of digital noise and dynamic exposure. Rather than artificially brightening night scenes, the cinematographers embrace deep shadows, allowing the creature to nearly disappear into the darkness, a visual metaphor for a being who does not yet belong to the world. High ISO sensors handled low light with softness rather than grit, giving the scenes a painterly texture reminiscent of oil portraits. Digital noise reduction was used sparingly. The filmmakers understood that a small amount of grain adds psychological warmth, a reminder of imperfection in a story about unnatural perfection. Even the rain and fog effects were engineered with care. Atmospheric density was measured using photometric meters to ensure consistency between shots. This mathematical approach prevents continuity errors but also supports the film's emotional rhythm. Thicker fog during moments of confusion, lighter haze during revelation. Moisture also intact beautifully with large format sensors, creating highlight blooms that evoke a dreamlike tenderness. Ultimately, the cinematography of Frankenstein, 2025, feels like both a scientific instrument and a Gothic lantern. It translates emotion into optics, moral struggle into geometry, and technological ambition into color and motion. It is a reminder that cinematography, at its highest level, is not just about documenting a story. It is about engineering the very way we feel while we watch it. Sound in Frankenstein, 2025. Is not an accessory. It is an emotional scaffolding, a silent partner in the architecture of fear, grief, and awe. From the first frame, the audience is immersed in a world where every footstep, every whispered breath, and every metallic clang carries meaning beyond the visual. Del Toro's collaboration with sound designers and composers transformed the auditory dimension into a parallel narrative, translating psychological tension and moral stakes into measurable sonic form. The film's audio environment is meticulously laid, blending traditional orchestration, digital augmentation, and environmental fidelity. The creature's initial encounters with the world exemplify sound's role in psychological storytelling. Each rustle of leaves, distant bird call, or drop of water is captured using spatially aware microphone arrays, enabling Dolby Atmos mixing to place these sounds around the audience in a 360-degree field. This immersion mirrors a creature's own sensory overload, allowing viewers to inhabit his perception. Every subtle movement of Jacob Elordi's physical performance is supported by close MIC capture of fabric, footsteps, and lab materials, enhancing tactile realism. Sound and performance exist in lockstep, a technological echo of emotional intent. Musical composition, led by a hybrid of orchestral and electronic instrumentation, functions both narratively and psychologically. Traditional strings and piano evoke Gothic melancholy, while low-frequency synth undertones accentuate unease and moral tension. The score is deliberately restrained in early sequences, allowing silence and natural diegetic sounds to dominate. As narrative stakes heighten, percussion and dissonant harmonics emerge strategically, reinforcing viewer anxiety without overwhelming performance or dialogue. This is sound economy in practice. Investment in subtle, high-impact auditory cues rather than constant oral stimulation. The film's Foley team achieved remarkable specificity, capturing sounds with high-fidelity microphones that register textures often invisible to casual viewers. The micro-scratch of a table under pressure, the whisper of prosthetic skin shifting, the subtle rustle of cloak fabric during movement. These micro-details create an emotional resonance that is subconscious yet undeniably powerful. The result is an oral tapestry that rewards attentive listening, reinforcing the creature's presence and Victor's emotional isolation. Dialogue capture was approached with dual strategies: primary location recording and supplemental ADR, automated dialogue replacement. The former ensured authenticity of performance, particularly in large, reverberant spaces, while the latter allowed precision in tonal and emotional nuance. Pro Tools sessions for ADR meticulously matched ambient reflections, maintaining the integrity of the cinematic space. This approach illustrates an investment in believability, as even slight dissonance between recorded and inserted sound can fracture motion and undermine psychological engagement. Dynamic range management was a critical consideration. Moments of high emotional tension, such as a creature's first violent confrontation, contrast sharply with intimate close-up dialogue or whispered regret. Engineers calibrated compressors and limiters to preserve subtlety without sacrificing impact. The balance of silence and sound becomes a form of ROI. Strategic investment in sonic peaks yields exponential narrative and emotional returns. Environmental sound design merges practical recording with synthetic enhancement. Rain, wind, and ambient echoes are captured on location, then layered with subtle CGI-aided elements to create textures that feel simultaneously organic and heightened. For instance, storm sequences employ multiband layering, allowing the lower frequencies to shake subwoofers while higher frequency details punctuate suspense. These techniques ensure the audience feels physical as well as psychological immersion, a tactile dimension of auditory engineering. Musical motifs for characters operate like behavioral cues. Victor's scenes are underscored by minor keys and slow tempi, reinforcing moral weight and grief, whereas a creature's early appearances employ rising harmonic intervals and unresolved dissonances, signifying curiosity, emotional turbulence, and potential danger. Thematic leitmotifs evolve with narrative development, providing subconscious cues for emotional investment and cognitive anticipation, effectively a psychological score tied to audience behavioral response. Spatial mixing is optimized for both theatrical Dolby Atmos presentations and home streaming platforms. Multi-channel stems are designed to preserve clarity and localization, ensuring that overhead and surround channels deliver the intended psychological effect. For example, the hum of laboratory machinery moves around the listener to suggest the creature's intrusion into human order, creating a visceral sense of disruption. The auditory experience is thus narrative, ethical, and psychological simultaneously, a triad of sound design excellence. The film's soundscape also functions as a risk mitigation tool, financially and artistically. By investing in high-quality recording, Foley, and post-production sound, the filmmakers reduce the likelihood of costly reshoots or ADR corrections while enhancing critical reception. Reviews have already highlighted immersive audio as a key factor in the film's emotional impact, demonstrating measurable IOI. Production expenditure on sound translates into audience engagement, positive critique, and long-term brand value. In conclusion, the sound design and music of Frankenstein 2025 exemplify a meticulous fusion of artistry, technology, and psychological insight. Every auditory element is intentionally positioned to reflect character state, narrative tension, and thematic resonance. The film proves that in modern cinema, sonic architecture is not just supplemental but foundational, an engineering of emotion that amplifies every frame, every movement, and every moral choice. The audience is not merely watching the story, they are inhabiting it through sound. The marketing of Frankenstein 2025 exemplifies modern cinematic strategy, a carefully orchestrated campaign that balances emotional intrigue with data-driven precision. The studio treated the film as both cultural product and market experiment, leveraging audience analytics to maximize impact across platforms. From teaser releases to influencer partnerships, every element was mapped against potential viewership, engagement metrics, and subscription conversion rates, reflecting a philosophy in which marketing is as much science as art. Initial teaser trailers were released to segmented demographics across social media platforms. Analytics teams monitored engagement using CTR, click-through rate, average watch time, and sentiment analysis. For younger horror and sci-fi audiences, a 45-second teaser emphasizing the creature's discovery of the world achieved peak engagement, whereas for adult drama viewers, trailers highlighting moral tension and philosophical dialogue performed better. This early feedback informed subsequent marketing pushes, demonstrating real-time adjustment in campaign strategy. Influencer marketing was leveraged strategically, rather than broad, untargeted campaigns. The studio collaborated with content creators in science education, Gothic literature, and film critique niches. These creators provided organic commentary, behind-the-scenes insights, and speculative discussions about ethics and technology, amplifying engagement while maintaining credibility. Audience metrics indicated a higher share of engagement from educational content, highlighting the film's potential to appeal across entertainment and intellectual domains. A/B testing shaped not only ad creative but also messaging tone. Early iterations of social posts were tracked for impressions, conversions, and sentiment shifts. Headlines emphasizing ethical dilemmas versus Gothic horror elements were compared. Observed behavior revealed that audiences were most responsive to a narrative blend. Intrigue about the creature's creation paired with reflections on human ambition. This guided not only social posts but also trailer edits, poster design, and festival placement. Strategic partnerships amplified market reach. Collaborations with streaming platforms ensured feature placement in top banners, while cross-promotions with educational publishers and STEM organizations highlighted the film's ethical and scientific narrative. By positioning the film simultaneously as entertainment and conversation starter, marketing capitalized on multiple audience segments. Early analytics suggested high retention and sharing likelihood among viewers aged 18 to 35, a demographic crucial for streaming subscription retention. International marketing required localization not only of language but of emotional resonance. Subtitles, dubbing, and culturally relevant visuals were tailored to target regions, with analytics teams tracking engagement by geography. Metrics such as view completion rate and post-view survey sentiment informed adaptive strategies, ensuring that the same film could generate optimal IOI across diverse cultural markets. Data-driven decisions extended to theatrical release windows. Analysts compared historical performance of Gothic horror adaptations, streaming first versus theatrical first models, and seasonal audience behaviors. The outcome was a limited early theatrical release followed by a streaming debut, a strategy designed to maximize cultural impact while mitigating financial risk. Box office projections were continuously refined with pre-release ticket sales, social sentiment, and influencer engagement metrics. Merchandise and ancillary product were integrated into the analytics ecosystem. Limited edition collector sets, educational tie-ins, and digital experiences were tracked for uptake and audience resonance. Observed behavior-informed reallocation of marketing spend toward high-performing channels and products, demonstrating continuous feedback loop between audience analytics and revenue strategy. Pre-release buzz was monitored across social media platforms using natural language processing to evaluate sentiment trends. Positive emotional responses to character design, ethical dilemmas, and visual spectacle were quantified, guiding last-minute creative adjustments for digital ads and trailers. Negative feedback, such as perceived overcomplexity or ambiguity, was addressed by modifying messaging to highlight narrative accessibility without sacrificing thematic depth. Post-release, analytics continued to inform strategy. Streaming viewership patterns, including start-to-finish completion rates, rewatch frequency, and scene-level engagement, were analyzed to understand emotional ROI. These insights shaped subsequent marketing campaigns, award promotion, and secondary content, such as behind-the-scenes features. The use of analytics transformed marketing from static pre-launch planning into a dynamic, ongoing process of optimization. Ultimately, the marketing of Frankenstein, 2025, demonstrates how modern studios blend narrative storytelling with rigorous audience intelligence. Every creative decision, from teaser framing to influencer partnership, from color grading in trailers to subtitle adaptation, was informed by data, yet executed with an artistic sensibility that respected the story's Gothic, ethical, and psychological dimensions. The result is a campaign that not only drives viewership but also elevates engagement, ensuring that audience attention is translated into measurable cultural and financial value. The arrival of Frankenstein, 2025, on both screens and streaming platforms sparked not only public conversation, but also critical inquiry into its artistry, technology, and ethical depth. Early reviews emphasized the seamless integration of Gothic horror, modern science, and character-driven psychology. Critics highlight Del Toro's directorial vision, the meticulous prosthetic and digital design, and the narrative's capacity to provoke reflection on human ambition. This reception signals not just appreciation for cinematic craft, but also the film's positioning as a cultural touchstone with potential long-term value. On review aggregator platforms, the film maintains high positive scores, with critics praising both technical achievement and emotional resonance. Early Rotten Tomatoes data reflects a critic score hovering around *87%**, while audience scores approach *91%**, indicating broad engagement across demographics. Observers consistently note the creature's psychological depth, the ethical framing of Victor's ambition, and a hybrid cinematography that merges traditional Gothic aesthetics with modern large-format technology. These metrics demonstrate alignment between critical assessment and audience perception, a key factor in predicting the film's sustained cultural footprint. Awards bodies have responded positively, particularly in technical and craft categories. The film has already been shortlisted for recognition in ***, Best Visual Effects, ***, Makeup and Hairstyling, ***, Cinematography, and ***, Production Design, highlighting its innovative fusion of practical artistry and digital enhancement. Additionally, Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi have received praise for performances that translate moral and psychological complexity into compelling visual and emotional expression, with early award circuits noting their work as emotionally nuanced and technically demanding. Such critical accolades enhance both brand value and long-term ROI by establishing industry prestige. Beyond immediate accolades, the film's legacy is positioned to influence educational and professional discussions in both science and the humanities. By integrating scientifically informed ethical dilemmas with narrative drama, Frankenstein, 2025, serves as a case study in bioethics, neuroscience, and creative psychology. Universities, STEM outreach programs, and film studies curricula already considering the film for inclusion in discussion modules, demonstrating ancillary value beyond traditional box office or streaming metrics. This dual impact, artistic and educational, expands the potential longevity of its cultural capital. From a financial perspective, critical reception amplifies streaming and theatrical IOI. Positive reviews directly influence viewership patterns, particularly in streaming-first markets, increasing first-week completions, repeat viewership, and subscription retention. Metrics indicate that films praise innovation, narrative depth, and psychological realism tend to generate higher long-tail engagement, often translating into licensing opportunities for international distribution, merchandising, and special edition releases. Frankenstein, 2025. Is poised to benefit from all three. Legacy forecasting also considers brand expansion and intellectual property potential. The franchise value of Frankenstein as a cultural touchstone is already immense, and this iteration revitalizes it for a 21st century audience. Potential exists for spin-offs and educational programming, VR experiences, immersive theatrical installations, and interactive digital storytelling. Each of these pathways leverage the original film's reception to maximize brand longevity and financial yield, creating a layered IOI that combines tangible revenue with intangible cultural capital. Industry analysts highlight the film's dual success in narrative sophistication and technical innovation as predictive of long-term syndication value. High-resolution cinematography, carefully engineered soundscapes, and hybrid VFX make it particularly attractive for future streaming upgrades, theatrical re-releases in premium formats, and collector's editions on Blu-ray or digital packages. Films with this combination of aesthetic and technical longevity often enjoy revenue streams extending well beyond initial release windows, illustrating the financial prudence of investing in high production quality alongside narrative depth. Cultural and critical integration also enhances merchandising potential. Limited edition books, art prints, educational tie-ins, and thematic collectibles draw directly on the film's reception, creating a virtuous cycle. Critical acclaim bolsters perceived prestige, which increases demand for physical and digital products, further extending IOI. The creature's design, a highlight of both technical and artistic achievement, becomes a signature emblem for the brand, bridging visual storytelling with tangible commercial opportunity. Forecasting legacy also requires attention to social conversation. Positive critical discourse around ethics, science, and morality promotes sustained engagement on social platforms, academic forums, and fan communities. Early analytics indicate substantial engagement with articles, discussion threads, and educational content inspired by the film. Such discourse reinforces cultural relevance, creating a feedback loop that strengthens both long-term viewership and brand perception. In conclusion, Frankenstein, 2025, has already secured a firm foundation in both critical and cultural spheres. Its reception validates the integration of sophisticated technology, psychological realism, and ethically informed storytelling. Award recognition, industry buzz, educational applications, and merchandise potential collectively forecast a legacy that extends beyond immediate financial returns. The film exemplifies how thoughtful cinematic production, backed by careful attention to artistry and technology, can generate cultural, emotional, and economic value simultaneously. As the final frame fades and the credits roll on Frankenstein, 2025, one cannot help but reflect on the delicate equilibrium between creative vision, technological mastery, and financial orchestration. This is not merely a story of a scientist and his creation. It is a study in the alchemy of cinema itself. The film embodies a convergence of centuries-old Gothic narrative with modern technological possibility, proving that storytelling, science, and commerce need not exist in tension, but can instead harmonize to amplify human experience. Artistic ambition was a catalyst, with Guillermo del Toro orchestrating every detail to serve both emotional resonance and narrative clarity. Prosthetics, set design, and cinematography are not decorative embellishments, but extensions of character psychology. Every shadow, reflection, and movement was meticulously planned to communicate moral weight and internal conflict. At the same time, technological innovation, large-format digital sensors, hybrid VFX, advanced color grading, Dolby Atmos soundscapes ensures that these emotional beats are conveyed with precision, consistency, and immersive fidelity. The audience doesn't merely observe the creature's struggle, they inhabit it. Yet art and technology alone are insufficient without an underpinning of disciplined financial strategy. The film's $120 million, approximate, budget was allocated to maximize both creative output and measurable ROI. Production management, hybrid release strategies, streaming analytics, and targeted marketing campaigns all ensured that the film's emotional and visual investment would translate into economic sustainability. Even the careful balance between theatrical release and Netflix streaming illustrates a sophisticated understanding of modern audience behavior. Revenue and viewership were treated as parallel outcomes of the same strategic process. Psychology and human behavior thread through the entire production. Character decisions, visual cues, soundscapes, and even lighting rhythms were designed to engage viewer empathy and ethical reflection. Victor's hubris, the creature's emerging consciousness, and the surrounding moral tension was structured to produce deliberate cognitive and emotional responses. By analyzing opportunity cost, decision-making under pressure, and the consequences of ambition, the filmmakers created a story that is simultaneously entertaining and intellectually stimulating, reinforcing the educational potential noted in critical discourse and audience analytics. The film's marketing and audience engagement strategy further illustrates the synthesis. Every trailer, social post, influencer collaboration, and data-informed adjustment was designed to align emotional storytelling with measurable viewer behavior. Marketing was treated as a continuation of production design, each message carefully calibrated to maximize attention, engagement, and comprehension while preserving the integrity of the narrative. Analytics were not used merely to optimize profit but to refine audience understanding and emotional impact, illustrating a thoughtful integration of data science with artistic sensibility. Historically and scientifically, the film demonstrates respect for authenticity while embracing creative interpretation. Consultations with geneticists, neurologists, and bioethicists allowed the creature's existence to inhabit a plausible, if speculative, scientific framework. Gothic aesthetic choices anchor the narrative in cultural memory, yet modern scientific insight ensures that the story resonates with contemporary audiences. This duality is a central component of the film's longevity. It educates while it entertains, it challenges while it captivates, and it bridges past imagination with present innovation. The technical mastery of cinematography, sound, and VFX ensures that each frame communicates with clarity and depth. The visual engineering transforms narrative intent into measurable aesthetic impact, while sound design creates an invisible architecture of emotion. Every element, color science, lens choice, spatial mixing, lighting rhythm, is optimized to maximize both psychological immersion and cinematic beauty. The convergence of technology and artistry demonstrates that precision engineering does not dilute imagination, it amplifies it, allowing every dollar of budget to translate into both emotional and financial value. Financially, the film illustrates how modern studio economics can enable bold artistic choices. Hybrid streaming theatrical release, coupled with targeted marketing, merchandising, and licensing opportunities, ensures sustainable ROI while preserving narrative integrity. Every production and post-production decision, from set construction to prosthetic design, from sound layering to audience testing, reflects a discipline in which capital is an enabler of creativity rather than a limiter. The film's success, both critically and commercially, confirms the wisdom of integrating art, technology, and capital from the earliest conception to the final frame. In a broader sense, Frankenstein, 2025, is a lesson in harmonious design, human ambition guided by ethical awareness, technology applied with intention, and investment strategically deployed to support, rather than constrain, creativity. The film exemplifies a model where storytelling, scientific insight, and financial stewardship coexist, producing not only entertainment but also cultural, educational, and psychological value. It reminds creators, investors, and audiences alike that cinema at its highest level is an ecosystem in which every element, artistic, technological, financial, amplifies the others. If you found this deep dive meaningful, my literature-loving friends, consider liking and subscribing so we can keep decoding the business.